biggest things that I'm thinking through is one thing that I asked Dan actually in the green room, like, talk to me about the, like the stock options, things like that. It's like owners. And I'm like, that's super interesting because I think that gets it really motivating really fast, right? Like back to like people in the trenches real quick. I'm not want to make sure that people understand like the upside of that game. I think when things are on paper, like it's been, I'll tell you the story that most hit me when I understood the stock option play. I was like, Facebook was obviously my biggest win in my career, right? And last night, ironically, going through social, I got home late around midnight and I saw that the stock market had a big day. I tend to look at my portfolio once every 3 months. But I just happened to see like, oh, Dow Jones went off. I'm like, oh, let me look. And I saw that Facebook was at $400 a share. And immediately I got like the worst pit in my stomach, not for me. From the day I invested in Facebook 4 years before its IPO to this morning, I've never sold a share because I believed in the founder. Right, obviously I'm very aware of what people think about Zucks and the way the media's played it out, but as the guy driving it, I always told my whole family that the day he's out is the day I sell, but until he's out, I hold forever. The reason I'm bringing it up is what I'm most fascinated about 2024, what I'm most fascinated about every employee in here at this moment in the history of GoPuff's company as a complete outside observer who watches the game, is I'm fascinated by people's lack of patience. The reason I bring up this Facebook story to you this morning is because I was early at Facebook, because I made a video in 2007-06 that said Facebook should be worried about this new app called Twitter. And it went viral inside of Facebook and I got called to go give a speech. Check this out. The entire company of Facebook at the time when I gave my talk of why Twitter was gonna be a thing was half the size of this audience right now. It was early. I didn't even know Zucks was in the audience, back to how like weird and different he is. He was in the way back and I did my spiel. And in 2006, I said, social media is gonna win because it's human behavior. That's it. Like the reason everybody wears the hat and the clothes they wear is to communicate to others. The reason we buy fancy cars is to communicate to others. Almost everything we do as humans is to communicate to others. Obviously with our mouths and the way we roll, but with subtle shit that you don't even realize. Every photo you ever posted on social is subconsciously something you're trying to say. Position yourself. Front at worst, or communicate your truth at best. And so that's how it is, and so I understood that. Anyway, that struck a chord, we hit it off, we had dinner, and I invested in Facebook very quickly after that, and I mean all of my savings. I bet the farm. The part about patience that I want to talk about in 2024 is about what happened next. 3 years later, it went public. Over those 3 years before it went public, I got to know a bunch of the top 100 execs. When the stock came out, some of you might remember this because you were youngsters, or it was a big moment. It opened at about $40 a share, 42. It went down to 19 pretty quickly. Most of the friends that I made in those 3 years that were top 300, 400, first 500 employees at Facebook sold somewhere between 25 and 19. They made a lot of money. The ones I knew were there super early and very senior. They made a lot. No, this story is not to cry for those motherfuckers. What's interesting is seeing them over the last 10 years. What's interesting for me is someone who got in for much less, much later. The fact that I'm gonna end up making more money on Facebook than a lot of those people fucks with me. And it was just one big game of lack of patience. And so I think what I'm most focused about in 2024 personally is thinking about that. How much of my decision making is based on tomorrow and how much is it for a year from now? You know what I love about retail? What I love about retail is the signature story that is still told in my dad's liquor store, even though I haven't been there day to day for a decade, is a story of December 18th in our store when I was the most important salesman on the floor. And it was snowing and we had just done the internet thing for the last 4 or 5 years. And we got a phone call from a woman in Bergen County, New Jersey, who was not yelling at us. She was like, when I got on the phone, she sounded like fucking Yoda. She was like 1,000. but she was complaining that it was important for her to get, and this is a good one, especially for the Venmo crowd, her Behringer White Zinfandel. Rosé used to be sweet, for all of you that don't know, in America. Her Behringer White Zinfandel had not been delivered, and it was a whole to-do, and her son called and says, you don't understand, and the FedEx that got delivered. Anyway, punchline is this. In one of our busiest days of the year, off of me learning about this while I was on the floor from the internet department, I ran downstairs to the warehouse, grabbed a 15-pack of Behringer White Zinfandel, threw it into my car, and drove to Bergen County and delivered it personally and drove back and was off the floor for about 2 or 3 hours. During that time, many top dog customers came in, only willing to work with me, ready to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on their collection, and left. When I got back, the core crew was like, what the fuck? What I knew then, and I did many things like this is the one I just get to tell on stage. What I knew then was actions have to set the tone for a culture. What I knew was I was gonna take an L in the short term on that day. But I felt that it would be something that everybody in the crew, especially because I knew I was looking to build long term, and the 20 people that were around me, I was hoping and played out, would be there for 10, 15 years. I needed something to point to for them to understand what our DNA was. Both on the corporate side and in the trenches here, I think we think too short term. The reason I tell that story is with the hope that one person decides, like, that makes sense. When I face something tomorrow, do I think about it from the short-term reality of it, or do I think about it as, is this an opportunity to set the tone for what we're trying to do? I think that kind of mentality of patience and brand building and culture building is everything. You know, to me, for example, this event. With this event, when I was asked to do it back in the winter, I was so pumped that you were all gonna be together. I remember just thinking like, yes, that's exactly right. And I'm a businessman, and I'm paying attention. So I'm aware of what's macro going on with GoPuff, and they're trying to be strategic about what they spend their money on and not. And I'm like, good for them to understand this. Like, for example, what he just did was fucking phenomenal. I hope I dropped 3 or 4 things that make you think about something and maybe do something. This will be a good day of like content, I'm sure. But everything that happens on this stage today is bullshit compared to if you take advantage of all the downtime, all those minutes in between lunch break. I don't know what the fuck, you do lunch? Your lunch? I don't eat lunch, I think it's a complete fucking waste of time. I think that the thing that I'm most thinking about of like, what's everyone in here thinking about? Like, how are they thinking about this year? I think perspective is a big focus of mine. I think that how one sees life is how it is, right? I've been very like weirded out by this whole half glass full, half glass empty thing. And that really struck me too as I thought about this talk. I'm like, just wondering how people are thinking about shit at GoPuff, right? Because for me, again, just to put it into, actually, how many people here know very little about me or have no idea who the fuck I am? Just raise your hands real loud. All right, that fucking hurts. Let me actually, I thought that might be the case, so let me give you 3 seconds on this to set up what I was about to say. So real quick for everyone who just raised your hands, I was born in the Soviet Union, I immigrated to the US, we lived in Queens in a studio apartment with 8 family members. It was ghetto fucking, you know, immigrant shit. Like, by the time I was 8, I realized my parents aren't buying me toys or video games, so I was fucking straight. Lemonade stands. Like, when I was 7, because we moved to Edison, New Jersey, when I was 7, I literally tricked or manipulated or convinced or motivated my 6 best friends to stand behind lemonade stands all day long. And this group is way too young, but for the couple of you that are in your 40s or above, I don't know if you remember back in the 80s, we had something called big wheels. They were like that, you remember that shit? I used to ride my big wheels at like 5 p.m. during the summer, at the end of the day, I would ride my big wheels to the 6 lemonade stand locations that I created and picked up my money like I was fucking Tony Soprano. And then I went into baseball cards. I was making like $2,000 a weekend selling baseball cards in 7th and 8th grade in 1985. Like real talk, when you have $10,000 in cash under your bed and you're 11 and you're not selling weed, you're a fucking entrepreneur. And then, thank you. Then my dad ruined my life. I was making all this money, and then I turned 14. Oldest son, born in the old country. My dad went from a stock boy making $2 an hour in a liquor store to owning a small store in Springfield, New Jersey. And so merchant's son, like I had to go work there. And I went from making $1,000, $2,000 a weekend, selling baseball cards in the malls in New Jersey, being cool and fucking living, to making $2 an hour, working 14 hours a day in my dad's liquor store. And I mean every day. I don't know how many of you have a Soviet father, but it was like no bullshit. It was 14 hours a day, 7 hours in the basement bagging ice for the cooler and then coming up and stocking shelves. And that like became the foundation of my career. Then I realized people collected wine, and then in 1996, I launched one of the first e-commerce wine businesses in America called Wine Library. Blew up my dad's business, and that kind of is how my career took off. My dad really didn't, again, how many people here are immigrants, like their parents were born outside the US, or you have? Raise your hands. So you guys know, like, my dad didn't pay me shit, even though I worked from 22 to 34 in that liquor store. I built that business from a $3 to a $75 million business, and I never got paid more than $80,000, $90,000 a year, even though I did all that. And so I had to go do my own thing.